Hey guys, Andrew here with Curious Tech, and just doing a video today on overclocking your graphics card. And we're going to use MSI Afterburner, and I'll have the link to where you can download that. You know, different manufacturers with the aftermarket graphics cards, they may have their own overclocking software to use, but I really do find, even though I'm using a GTX 970, which is EVGA, I still like using MSI Afterburner for a few reasons. They do have a screen overlay on if you're running any games to see the frames per second, and a lot of the stats on the graphics card as well. So I can kind of show you that as well. But the main gist of the video today is going to be showing how to do a basic overclock on your graphics card. That's not going to be anything that could potentially harm your graphics card. So the overclocking we're going to do today, even if you did max settings and you just ran it, it's something that you're not going to have to worry about having to go buy a new graphics card because you overclocked it too far. So we're not going to be adding any voltage or any kind of physical modifications on the card itself. This is just going to be a software overclock, and I'm going to use 3D Mark to see the scores of, after changing the settings on through MSI Afterburner. We'll run 3D Mark to see the scores and see if we're getting a better score with the overclocking that we're doing. So I'll go ahead and bring the camera on in and we'll get started. Sorry about not doing on-screen capture, but really when you're doing any kind of overclocking with your graphics card, something like OBS, which is going to do on-screen video capture, is going to take up some of the resources on the graphics card. So really, to do a true overclock, you're going to want to shut down as much as you can that's going to deal with graphics on your computer, and you're going to want to run as, I wouldn't say bare bones on Windows, but I would run anything that you're trying to overclock right now. I'd run your system as if you would playing any of your games. We do have MSI Afterburner here, and and sorry about not being able to see my face, but that's probably a favor for you guys. But MSI is what we're using to control and overclock the graphics card, and 3D Mark is what we're doing to run the actual graphics test, the benchmark, and to see what kind of score we're getting. So the first thing you want to do is start just with base overclock. So with MSI Afterburner here, having your power limit at 100, and then not touching anything else. Also, this little back button will bring your graphics card back to stock. So if you're ever doing any overclocking and you're having some bad screen jitters or anything, just quickly come over, click this. It'll take the overclock settings back to stock, and it should help fix the system. So because you are going to run into some weird bugs here and there when you're pushing the card too far. So if we got it on stock settings, we just want to get our base score. So we're going to run Time Spy now, and it is a DirectX 12 benchmark. We'll just hit run on there, and you can go through the benchmarks up here and actually choose, because what this test actually does is there's a demo which stresses the card, then there's a graphics test 1, 2, and then a CPU test. The reason why I do the demo is I want the card to be hot. I could run it through a loop to really get the card warmed up and hot, completely heat soaked. But that's really the purpose of the demo here, is to just make sure the card's hot before it starts doing any of the actual testing where it's going to be recording the results. But this does take a minute here to load, and it's about a 5-minute test. And I will show you some screen captures of the test as well throughout the video. But we'll just go ahead and let this run here. The first 3D Mark test, and again on stock settings. And the score that we got, of course, the overall score is 3831, but we're really looking at just the graphics card since that's what we're overclocking right now. And that is 3,713. So that's our base score, and really what we're trying to do each time we make any modifications on MSI Afterburner here is to make sure that this graphics score is going up. And also we want to make sure that everything is stable when doing so. And if it's not stable and you're running this 3D Mark test, it will shut down in the middle of the test and you'll get a 0 score if there's any kind of instability going on. So to show an example of that, what we can do here is, like I had mentioned earlier in the video, you can move all these settings up to max and then hit this check mark. And as you can see, the computer is completely freaking out. That was a pretty hard crash, as you can see. So if I just go ahead and shut down the computer and bring it back up, what should happen is it should go back to the stock settings, and we should be able to just continue from there. But I really just wanted to show you an example of no matter what you do at this point with the MSI Afterburner or this software, you're not going to run a risk of your graphics card breaking. As you can see, we just posted again, starting back up into Windows. So leave it at that. So as mentioned before, you have a crash like that and you just bring up your system. That was a hard crash, so we did have to restart everything and physically restart the system ourselves. But let's just say we had an overclock that wasn't maybe so bad there. Usually right in there it'll crash. So I also want to just show you what a softer crash may look like. Just go ahead and show you what that looks like. So I just don't want anyone to be startled throughout this process, because you really aren't going to harm your card doing this. All right, as we move forward in time here, we're going to see what a softer crash is going to look like. As you can see, it just started, and within the first few frames it went ahead and just froze. So that's what a softer crash looks like, and usually what you can do on a typical crash when overclocking is just run it into your task manager, and you're able to go ahead and just end the task and start up the program again. You don't have to restart the entire system. So that's just a softer crash to show you throughout this process what's going on. So now I'm going to show you a step-by-step process. So we had our stock run and we got a graphics score of 3,713, and then I showed you a couple crashes there. So what I really wanted to show you now is our first score, again, of 3,713. The first thing that you can do to overclock your system that you're going to see a little bit of an improvement on your frames per second is just taking this power limiter and bringing it up to the max setting. On this card, 110 is the max power limit. Some cards may be 120, 105. It really just depends on the BIOS and the card itself. So just simply bringing this power limiter up, it also brings up the temp limit. And then you can have a priority on those. I usually just keep it on the power limit itself. And once you do that, you hit this check mark and you already have a small overclock. So now what's going on is you are adding another 10% power to the card. And again, this isn't gonna harm anything. So just by doing that, we'll run a test and see what our results are. And again, this is just moving the power limiter. As you can see, this is just with the power limit completely maxed out. And our new graphics score is 3,729. So it is pretty close to that margin of error of the first run that we had with the stock, but it is slightly better. So just that in itself, and this is gonna be this kind of overclock that you can do now. And if you just move the power limiter to 110 and leave it at that and save your settings, you have an overclock that's probably never gonna fail. So it really, the overclocking gets down to when we're doing the core clock here. And when we're trying to move this slider up to bring up the core clock, and then what we'll do second after that is bring up the memory clock. My main goal to show everyone today is to overclock this as far as I can without changing the fan speed from its auto fan curve. The reason why I like to keep the fan curve that automatically comes with the graphics card is that it is quieter, although if it ramps up I can hear it. But as soon as you start really making a fan curve that makes a difference to keep the card cooler, because the cooler you keep a card, the further you can overclock and move the core clock up or move the memory clock up, the cooler the card is. But if you bring that fan speed up to 50% or higher, it's audible, and it's something that you probably don't want to hear in the middle of gaming. If you're looking for pure performance, sure, go for it. You're going to get much higher overclocks, especially if you can bring like cold air to it or even water cool your graphics card. You're going to be able to get the most performance out of your graphics card. And so the first thing that I'm going to do here on this next one, because we have the stock run of 3,713, then we have the power limiter being maxed at, and we got a score of 3,729. We're gonna go ahead and just move this core clock up to 110. So we're going from 0 to 110. And what I would suggest is getting to this point, you're gonna wanna move up in small increments. I'm going straight to 110 because I know the graphics card can handle it. However, you may want to start at 50, 55, 60 and go up from there. And every card's different, even if you have the exact same card as mine, because it's silicon lottery. And the GPU itself, you may get really lucky and get one that can overclock really far, or you may get one to where if you just try to overclock it a little bit, every time it shuts down. And it is just a lottery, and you get what you get, don't throw a fit. And so just doing that, and we go ahead and hit the check mark here. We got power limit at 110, and we moved our core clock to 110. And we'll go ahead and run this test again, and we'll see the results we have. All right, so this time running 3D Mark, with the core clock at 110 and the power limit at 110, we are able to get a graphics score of 3,907. And this is a huge improvement. It's basically about 200 points higher on our graphics score. So you can see the potential that you can get out of your card. You're definitely able to get a lot more performance if you take the time to try to overclock your graphics card. The next step, as I mentioned before, is you want to bring your core clock up slowly in small increments until you know you have a stable core clock speed. What I found on my card is 110 is stable, and that's about the max I get. If I go to 115, 120 it will crash. 115, it tends to have some issues as well. So now the next step after getting your core clock up, you're going to want to go ahead and move the memory clock. And memory, you can usually run a little bit higher. I was able to do one at 300. So we'll do 300 first, save that, and we're gonna run another test. All right, so we got our results in, and even though we have the core clock still at 110 and we moved our memory clock to 300, it was a good run and didn't have any artifacts or any kind of issues. However, our graphics score is 3,727, and I did run it a couple times just to make sure that score is correct. So we actually lost 200 points by moving up our memory clock 300. So what we need to do is we need to bring this memory clock down because it's actually harming our score at the moment. And again, this takes a lot of time of just trying different results, putting down the data that you get, and just going from there and making changes. So this video is much shorter than the amount of time it actually takes to overclock a graphics card. I think the main thing to remember is make sure you set your power limit up to 110, then move to your core clock and do small increments forward or up. And once you find that you got it at the highest core clock that you can have, with it still being stable, that is when you go ahead and move on to your memory clock. And again, small increments on your memory clock as well. So that was at 300, and the best results I was able to get ran here. And this is with our power limit at 110 and the core clock's at 110. And again, the memory clock being at 225. And this is the best results I was able to get. And the graphics score is 3,979, which is over 250 points more than our stock graphics score performance of 3,713. And you can see the difference definitely in games. I would say, depending on the kind of game, you can get 5 to 10 frames per second difference when overclocking your graphics card, which is potentially huge, especially if you're really trying to get that leading edge against everyone else. You want to get everything you can, all the performance you can get out of your graphics card. And as I mentioned earlier, I had said that this is keeping the stock fan curve, and I do that because the stock fan curve is not very noisy. I'm able to play with the full overclock on games, and I'm not hearing the graphics card or the fans on the graphics card kick in. However, the cooler you can get your graphics card, the more you can overclock and push the memory clock or core clock, anything like that. So I do want to quickly show that with bringing the fan speed up to 50%, I was able, let's see here, bring the fan speed up to 50%, I was able to bring the core clock to 120 instead of 110 because, again, the fans are keeping the card cooler, therefore you can overclock it further. And if you were to water cool this card, again, you could move these sliders even further up. And ultimately, if you're doing liquid nitrogen, which is for professional overclocking. That's when you're able to really overclock a card to its full potential. And of course, if you get that extreme, then there is potential to hurt your card. And you are doing sometimes physical modifications on the card itself to give it more power when doing those types of overclocks. But anyways, whenever I do bring up the fan to 50%, core clock up and all of that, we'll go ahead and run this and I'll show you the results that I get. All right, and let's see, I accidentally closed out and didn't save that there, but the score I was able to get with bringing the fans was 4,012 on the graphics score, and remember just before we were at 3,980, so that's only a difference of about 32 points. But it is a difference. However, I can hear my graphics card, it's very audible, and I don't really like hearing my computer when I'm playing games. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring back down to the stock fan and have those previous settings that I mentioned. Okay, so now that we're kind of wrapping up today's video, we did get some good results on overclocking, and the only other suggestion I have is once you do have your final numbers with MSI Afterburner and running through 3D Mark, you could also download a software like Heaven Benchmark and just run it through a loop for 24 hours to make sure that your overclock settings are good. If anything crashes, then you know you need to go back through and bring some of the numbers down on MSI Afterburner. Then that's really how you would overclock and get your final settings. Like I said, run some tests and everything, because you don't want to be in the middle of online gaming, something that may matter to you, and the game crashes on you. So that's the risk of overclocking. So you really want to do due diligence when doing so. But other than that, I appreciate everyone tuning in, and I'll have a link in the description below where you can get MSI Afterburner along with 3D Mark, which I recommend getting through Steam. But other than that, thanks for checking out the video today. If you want, check out our previous video on some of the software that I do recommend. Some of it's freeware, some of it does cost a little bit, but it's just software on monitoring your system, and it does kind of mention 3D Mark as well. But again, thanks for tuning in. Have a good one.